Thanks, Julie. I heard that they were going to get rowdy next door, so they're already starting. That's okay. I wanted to share with you some of the medical response assets that we have from the state perspective, as well as as we scale up. And one of the secrets that I think that we have are some of the resources that are available from the Department of Health and from our local health departments as we scale up disasters. And we're going to talk about that scaling up, what that looks like. We're also going to talk about some of the federal resources that we have and how those interact with us. So we are going to start by, now this is a lot of words about discussing, but we're going to discuss a lot of things. Our health and medical falls into that life safety realm, and life safety doesn't necessarily need a Stafford Act to move. And so as a result of that, we're going to talk about our resources, how they apply both pre and post Stafford, and some of the federal resources that also apply pre and post Stafford Act. And how we can leverage and use those. And then I have a couple of scenarios that we're going to run through and what that would look like for gaining that experience. So we have, for lack of better term, this is Brett Cross terminology here. I have put all of our assets into three what I call buckets. So our three buckets of assets are, the first bucket is life safety. The only thing that is required from a life safety bucket asset is that the on-scene incident commander says that whatever it is will immediately aid in saving a life. And if it does that, done. Even if it's a state medical asset. It's that on-scene commander that gets to make that decision. It's not the health department. It's not calling our 800 number. It's not the local health department. It's the on-scene commander saying, you know what? That mass casualty trailer that's sitting over at the public works yard or wherever it is, pull it over here because those bandages are going to save lives. It's yours. Okay? Same thing with our chem packs. Our chem packs are the nerve agent antidote kits. The only requirement for those, again, they have to immediately aid in saving a life. So if you have a chemical exposure and you have reactions and you open it, that's a federal resource, but you open it and you start using the product that's in there. We do ask for all of those life safety bucket asset items, though, that you get back to us, that you let us know, hey, we've pulled this trailer over, we're using it, or we're using this chem pack or whatever it is. Some of the things that fall into the gray area, like the structure, right? We have a bunch of structures. We have a few mobile hospitals and things like that. That's a really hard stretch for us to say that that's going to, by putting up a tent, that's going to save a life. But it might be something that's absolutely necessary and can be done pre-Stafford, so that's what I call the gray. So the gray are some of those things that would be really nice to have, and we probably don't have time to wait for a disaster declaration and all of those things to make them happen. And as a result of that, that's a conversation then you would have with the health department. So you would call our on-call number, you call your local health department and say, we're experiencing this, we would love structure, we need this type of resource, and then we would be able to say, okay, that's a realistic request, let's go ahead and fill that need, recognizing that some of the assets that we own outright, there's somebody that told me that overhead costs, right? When I was in Afghanistan, they said, do you know how much it costs every time we go pick up a patient in a medevac helicopter? And they gave us some exorbitant number. It was like 10 grand or something ridiculous every time we fly to pick somebody up. I'm a realist in that approach. I recognize there are overhead costs, but at the same time, that helicopter sits outside of our emergency room 24 hours a day, and it breaks sitting there, right? Stuff breaks down. We're the elite fighting force in the world, and crap breaks in the parking lot. Tents break down, fabric wears out, all of those things happen regardless if we're in the air picking up patients or not, right? So the equipment itself, to me, is more of a gray. I recognize there's a cost to the equipment, there's an initial cost, there's maintenance costs and stuff, but it's okay, right? We already own it. It's not going to cost us any more to put up a tent, okay? This is the moral of my story there. So I don't think it costs us $10,000 to put up a tent, okay? It doesn't cost us that money to go fly to pick up a patient either. The only real cost is the JPA, right? The fuel that got us there and back, because the soldiers are sitting there, the helicopter's sitting there, it's already in Afghanistan, you're already going to feed me 3 meals a day, and so what are we out, right? So anyway, so that's how I feel about tents, my personal opinion. So if it's a tent or if it's some structure that like medical supplies that would need to be replaced. That's a cost, and we'd have to have that conversation. But some of our stuff. And then finally, the formal requesting process. So Stafford Act declarations are in place, EOCs are activated, ESF 8 is up and running smoothly because it would never run any other way. And so it's up and running smoothly at both the local, county, and state level, and you send in your request for emissions, and we provide you all the magical things that you need, okay? So these are kind of our three, I call buckets, and we'll get into what that looks like. So when we start thinking about an initial response, I'm a firm believer, and I know this to be true, that all disasters start and end locally. That everything that happens at the lowest level, and we need to do our best to keep it there. So we have pre-positioned some state assets, like our mass casualty trailers and the chem packs, and even some of our structures are pre-positioned in healthcare coalition regions within local health departments that are readily available. And so they could be used for that local event. They may not be used for that local event. And then as we know that a lot of areas have, like EMS has mutual aid agreements with all of their surrounding areas. So if there's an increased EMS need, they're going to rely on the agencies that are around them to get that, to make sure that happens, to make sure that they can transport patients, to make sure that they meet that 911 need of movement of patients. Where the state and the federal government comes into play later on is, okay, so now we've met the life safety need. 911 ambulances have moved all of these patients, but we have to evacuate a hospital, or we have to evacuate a long-term care center, or we have to move patients from this location to this location. That may not be the 911 ambulances that do that, right? We have a compact that we might have additional resources that can come in and help support that patient movement aspect. And then, and we already talked about that our assets can be moved. So there are some things that you might need help with from a local perspective when that disaster occurs. Here's a whole long list of them. One of them is patient tracking. How do we move patients around the state, and how do we know that they're being moved and accounted for? I had the privilege, and I'm going to tell you lots of stories about this. I had the privilege of going to Texas with the Federal Disaster Medical Assistance Team and watch some of their processes, and it was pretty neat. Texas moved all of their patients around their state all by themselves, and they somehow kept track of them all, which was pretty impressive. They closed a hospital in Beaumont, Texas. All of those patients got diffused into other healthcare systems within the state of Texas, and they didn't use the federal resources at all. That may be that they might be overwhelmed and they would have needed them, and they were there for that. But yes. No. So I think I skipped that, didn't I? So most of the hospitals, like the local disasters, if a hospital becomes overrun, they're going to try to go to a sister hospital or a hospital that is within their healthcare system. For example, like Intermountain Healthcare or Mountain Star. They would try to move patients because they want to keep those patients, right? Because it's their revenue. So they would want to try to keep those patients within their sister hospitals. That may not be the case. They might have to leave that healthcare system if the others are overwhelmed, and they still do that on a daily basis, right? Like there are still, like, hospitals will send patients to other hospitals because if you have an emergency, you can theoretically present to any ER and your insurance would cover that. But if you have to go somewhere, you would go to another facility. Your insurance might be University of Utah and you're at an IHC hospital, so you might need to go there or something. And if that's the case, they do those things already. So there's already a mechanism for them to leave sister hospital affiliations, but they're going to want to do their best to keep that revenue for sure. But in Texas, no, they did go to other hospitals. Yeah. And they had some really cool wristbands too that had like the Texas seal on them. I brought one home because I'm going to make one day. So we have a patient tracking system here in the state of Utah. It's not the most popular system because we don't know that we know how to use it on our best day. I'm an honest guy, by the way. I'll tell you that right up front. So you can rest assured that we'd figure it out in a heartbeat. But the system is there. It's the same system the federal government uses. They call theirs JPATS, Joint Patient Assessment and Tracking System. We got really creative when we created our patient tracking system, and we call ours UPATS, the Utah Patient Assessment and Tracking System. It's the same software, different logo, and it's hosted on our servers here locally. Is the only difference between that one and the federal system. and we can help aid in some of that movement and keeping track of them. It also keeps track of belongings. So if somebody has durable medical equipment, we can assign a wristband or a number to the piece of durable medical equipment, a wheelchair, a ventilator, oxygen concentrator, whatever it is, that gets tied to the patient, and then as its movement, we would track everything through its movement process. So if it leaves one hospital, goes to another one, we'd make sure that the patient and their ventilator got there. Hopefully the patient and the ventilator arrived at the same time, because that'd be a problem if they didn't. But like patient and wheelchair, they might get separated at some point, and so we want to make sure that we tie all of that equipment so as we are transferring it around, that we have good methods for that. We have 4 of these. These are called BlueMed's the manufacturer, so they're called BlueMeds, but they're 25-bed tents. And the reason I have 25-bed tents is that's how many cots are in the trailer, assuming they're not broken. 25 of them, right? So we got 25 beds. We have these in 2 sections. So there's a bigger section that'll be built off the back of this. This is a smaller section. This vestibule can be built wherever you want. And then we can put the beds in here, and we can see patients. We're very proficient at setting this up. There are people in this room that are really proficient at setting up these tents and taking them down. They are labor intensive. So as we have rewritten some of our rules or protocols or SOGs, whatever you want to call them for usage, we have chosen not to deploy BlueMed for anything less than 48 hours. So if it's anything less than a 48-hour operation, you're not getting a BlueMed. We've got other resources. We've got rapid deploy shelters that are inflatables or sidewalls, whatever it might be. But if you want one of these, you're going to have to convince me that it's going to be there for more than 2 days. And because this right here is 6 to 10 people for 6 to 8 hours to go up, okay, by the time it's all done. Yes, Jan?
Are you guys going to be able to deliver those tents, plus have the people there that will put it up?
I think you're trying to trick me, Jan. No. But no, the way the plan is right now, yes. Yeah, so we have the UHERT team, the medical team, is trained in putting these up. And there's 4 of them. They're in trailers, and they are in St. George, Price, Tremonton, and Salt Lake, one at our office. So that's where the 4 of them are. And sorry? St. George, Price, Tremonton, and Salt Lake. And they are, there's 4 of them. We're beefing them up as we go. They have their own generator in there. They're these big, giant diesel generators. They also have 2 HVAC units to heat and cool. They are a really good structure. Once they're up, they're solid. They're great climate controlled. They're roomy. They're super nice. They're just ridiculously labor intensive. And so we want to make sure that if we are setting these up, that they're going to be up for a while. Yes, Jan?
Still tricking you.
Okay.
So if Moab calls you up and says, we need one of the BlueMed tents, are you going to say, send somebody up with a truck that can tow it down here? Or do you have arrangements made so that the department will deliver it and the people to take the 6 hours to put it out?
Yeah.
Most local health departments, we have,
I can't hear you.
most local health departments that it's in our area, we have a way to move it, whether we've made an agreement with Hurricane Police Department or Washington County or whatever, they come and get it and take it where we need it. Most local health departments also have people that have gone through the process multiple times to, at least one time to set this up. But the team is the smart ones about it. They know really how to do it.
They don't have to read the
Yeah.
directions as they're going
Oh,
along.
that's true. And we got some people that are really proficient at this. But yes, so the answer to your question is yes. Like Paulette said, local health departments definitely, they're in their areas. They definitely know they're also the host location. We have agreements from them that they will move it. So wherever whoever has them has agreed to move it for us, or somebody. There is an agreement where somebody there has agreed to move it. Yes. Okay. I don't know else I was going to say something else. I had another thought, but I don't know what it was. So, but our more portable inflatables. They're made by a company called FSI or DLX or whoever makes the other tents. They're more rapidly deployable. We can throw those in the back of a trailer or in the back of a truck and move them and set them up very quickly. We do also have some other temporary heating and cooling units that can deploy out with them, as well as generators, and so we've got the whole 9 yards for other structures as well, not just the Blue Meds. And then we have PPE in our storage, and so if one of the challenges that we learned from Ebola was that when we send PPE to healthcare facilities that's not their standard PPE, they need somebody to tell them how to do it. So that if they are used to a Kimberly-Clark mask is their name brand, and the stockpile that we're sending them is 3M, we have to be able to be proficient in the application of the 3M equipment and training them on how to properly don and doff that. So we have people that are trained on the specific PPE that we house. I'm not going through all of these, by the way, just so you know. So blast, burn, surge. There's 2 ways. This is both a state and federal asset. We have some blast burn equipment. We have some specific trailer that was put together for burn patients, and then we also have the federal resources from the CDC Strategic National Stockpile. Also have blast burn kits in them that we can get from the federal government should that need arise. Our team was we had 2 teams up until about a year ago. We had the EMS team and we had the pediatric team. We've combined them. So we have a pretty heavy pediatric resources available to us. We have 3 pediatricians that are on our team, as well as a handful of the PICU, Pediatric Intensive Care Unit nurses that are on our team, and a handful of paramedics that deal with kids. And then our EMS teams have been integrated into that team to provide that support. So we have a pretty good pediatric support. And so we've talked a little about some of those pre-Stafford Act things. So the point to drive home is that we want to make sure that our resources are available and that that they can meet the needs of our local health departments and our local governments as soon as they need them. So when those resources are forward deployed, they're pretty much at the beck and call of the health departments. You call them because they're your channel. They can get that stuff for you. If you're the keeper of one, you know how to use it and where it is. And that can be a conversation too that we have. But the 2 items that we've mostly, chem packs. Is everyone familiar with a chem pack? Have I explained that yet? So a chem pack is a nerve agent antidote kit. We have 16 of them around the state. There's 2 types. There's hospitals and EMS chem packs. The hospital chem packs can treat about 1,000 patients. The EMS chem packs can do like 494. Why we couldn't say 500 is beyond me, but there's just no room for 500 patients. Okay, those 6 are out. So we've got around 500 and around 1,000 is what those chem packs can do. And those are obviously available pre-Stafford Act. And then our Strategic National Stockpile emergency medical countermeasures are also another pre-Stafford Act. So biological agent gets released, something like that happens. The Strategic National Stockpile releases all of the antibiotics. Those are pre-Stafford Act. They do not need a disaster declaration. They do need the HHS's secretary to release it. He or she is the one that pulls the trigger on that. With the request from the governor. So the governor, through Dr. Minor, the executive director of the health department, would make that request to the CDC. The CDC would then, especially if it's a biological agent, this is the easiest way to explain it, once we have requested those assets, then they convene a conference call with all of the 3-letter agencies, those that we know and those that we don't know, and they poke holes and ask questions in our request, right? So the CDC, HHS, FBI, DOJ, all of them are all on this call that we were requesting assets for, and we go through that, and the HHS secretary in the end will say yes or no. Okay, so those come to us. They don't need a presidential disaster declaration. We do know that all terrorism events, though, are pretty closely followed up with a presidential disaster declaration. But the idea is that we want to get the medications in people fast. So anybody know, aside from Paulette, anybody know how much time we have from exposure to when we have to have people to have prophylaxis for a biological event? I want to know the timeline on that. 2 weeks? It's a long time. 48 hours. 48 hours. So we have a plan. Our plan says, I don't know if we can do it, but we test it. Our plan says that in the state of Utah, we will be able to provide pills to every Utahn in 48 hours. It's a pretty lofty goal. So it's going to take all of our help to do that, but we've been working on this for a number of years to create a plan to make that happen. So that's another Pre-Stafford Act item. So here's some things that we have at our disposal at the health department. The first thing we have is we have our mobile field hospitals. That's what we're calling our Blue Meds. There's 4 of those. I told you where they're at. This right here is what we call the Utah Medical Station, formerly known as a federal medical station. A federal medical station, or a Utah medical station, is a 250-bed non-acute care hospital. So the federal government says, I call them up and I say, hey, federal government, this is Brett in Utah. Ron, actually, that's what I'd say. I need an FMS because we had a big old earthquake. Ron, you know what Ron says to me? Okay, this is all I need from you, Brett, state of Utah, DEM, wherever you are. All I need is a 20,000 square foot, undamaged, climate-controlled facility with full wraparound services, including laundry, showers, food, and someone to fluff pillows. Once you have all of that, call me back. We'll send you an FMS. Anybody know where we got that? Anybody have any ideas? I don't either. So, I'm just kidding. I do. There's a couple places we got in mind, but undamaged is a hard part, especially for us when we think of earthquake planning and being available and meet all those requirements. So, this Utah Medical Station will allow us to be a little more flexible in that the federal government's also getting a little more flexible in that they are going to allow us at some point in the near future to request an FMS in 50-bed increments. So if we said we need 50, they would send us 50. If we need 500, they would send us 500. But right now, the FMS request process is 250 beds. It will come with staff, though. It will come with HHS, DOD, all of those people, medical people, Public Health Service Corps, to staff those 250 beds, okay? Ours, we are going to break this down at the end of March 26th through 29th. We're gonna move this from our warehouse, this is where it lives right now in North Salt Lake, to the Mountain America Southtown Exposition Delta Center. You know, they all change names every day. So whatever that one is in Sandy, we're going to move it down there, and we're going to lay it out, and we're going to break this down into 250-bed kits. So the 250-bed kits, the reason why we chose 50 is because it's a good number. It's not like 494, something right crazy like that. It's a good number, and 50 beds would be able to evacuate 80% of the hospitals in Utah. So if we had 50 beds and we had to evacuate a hospital, 80% of them will be covered. The other ones are really big. The federal government's going to have to come take care of that anyway. So we're going to break this down, and we're going to do 250 beds. We're going to, and Wyoming did this just before us last year. So they have it all mapped out for us. And then the rest of the equipment will be able to be used as backup supplies. The beds will be able to be used, all those kinds of things for other things. But we're really excited about getting the 250 beds. Our goal would be to have one here in Salt Lake and one in St. George. That's a lofty goal of ours, but that's what we're going to do is try to keep one kit here, one kit there, and be able to handle some medical sheltering. Because medical sheltering is one of those things that we just don't want to talk about. Because it's a hard one, right? Like, general population sheltering is hard on its best day, and then to add the complications of medical sheltering or nursing homes or being evacuated, those kinds of things make it even more difficult. So we have some support trailers. The support, yes?
Okay, Adam. All right, so your federal medical station comes with doctors, nurses, all of them.
Correct.
Your Utah medical station
Is going to come with a lot of people from all of our resources. So I can't say it right now. I can't stand up here and tell you that the UHERT team is going to staff that, because that's not true. Depending on the size of the disaster, depending on the number of people, I can tell you that what we know from medical sheltering is that it's pretty low acute care. So it's going to require less doctors and nurses and things than we, mostly techs, CNAs, people that can help transfer patients, do basic cares. So we do know that. But I can't tell you that UHERT team can do it. I can tell you that we're going to be there to help you. I can tell you that we're hoping that the MRC units will be able to help cover that, and any other, the healthcare system. If a hospital is evacuating, we're hoping that their staff is coming with us so that they can help take care of patients wherever we create that alternate care site. So I don't have a silver bullet that says that UHERT team's going to do it, but I can say that collectively our hope is that if we have one 50-bed medical station, it's probably a more regional event that we're supporting, and hopefully we can get some additional people from outside of that region to help us support that request. Once it gets bigger than that, we're going to have the federal government come in and help us with some of that stuff. And then our support trailers were originally designed for our strike teams, but they are self-sustained kits for the Moelfield hospitals, so they can take the staff, I think 15 or so of the staff. I didn't do that. They could take 15 or so of the staff and provide them with tents and cots and sleeping bags and food and water for 72 hours. So they've got fuel. They got fuel cans. We don't keep fuel in the trailers, but they have fuel cans. They have a generator. They have all sorts of things to. Thank you, Julie. They have all sorts of things in there to help sustain those teams. So if we do deploy a team in to help you, we're going to come self-sustained. If you're a local emergency manager, health department, we're hopefully going to be able to bring our own stuff so that we don't become a draw on your system for that first 72 hours. We have some communication kits. These are pretty cool kits. We've got a couple kits of 800 megahertz radios that are 10 each. We have some VHF radios, and those are available for requesting, and they're also, there it goes. And so those are some of the resources that we have at the state level. We also have the, I don't know where I am. Let me see where I am. I don't know what's next. Stand by. Okay, so the National Disaster Medical System. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I am a paramedic on the Utah 1 DMAT team. So I had the privilege of recently deploying to Texas, and it was pretty cool to see some of the things that we've all talked about that have been theoretical come to fruition. Like one of those is if a DMAT team, a disaster medical assistance team, is a 36-person element of doctors, nurses, and medics, and some mental health folks that their original design was ER decompression. After 2001, we made these teams to be ER decompression because that was the need, so that's what the teams are based off of. Then Katrina happened, and the teams kind of evolved a little bit into more general care, medical shelter type teams. And so they are 36-person teams, and I'm trying to figure out the best way to say that. They're modular though, so they will be able to break those teams down, create strike teams, or plus them up. When we were at the George R. Brown Convention Center in Texas, we had 4 DMAT teams that were assigned to take care of patients in the George R. Brown. We basically ran a really big 24-hour urgent care. So patients come in, most of them needed medication refills. We would refill their medications. We would see them for whatever it was that they had, if they were shelter clients. If one presented with some condition, like someone came with chest pain, we would be able to put them on a monitor, do a 12-lead EKG. Our doctor would look at them. We also had an iStat machine to be able to do some basic labs so we could get a cardiac panel, some troponin or something like that, and to see if they were having a heart attack. If they were, we'd put them in an ambulance, send them on their way. If they weren't, we'd probably give them some Halidol and tell them to sleep it off, right? Just kidding. Medically would know. So, and then we do have DMORT teams. That's mortuary affairs folks. The DMORT teams can help us with mass fatality events, with identification, and all that fun stuff. This TCCT, the trauma critical care teams, are pretty cool. We saw them while we were there. We all set up at an airport because we were going to do outbound patient movement. So our job was going to be if patients came in, and we were going to see them, we would see them, we would treat them temporarily, and then we would put them on an aircraft, and then the Department of Defense would fly them out. How many of you knew that Salt Lake City is one of those cities that has a potential of receiving disaster patients from another city? It's called an FCC, Federal Coordinating Center, and we use the National Guard Air Base over here at the airport and the VA coordinates it, and our team provides the medical care. So patients, if the disaster happens, let's say it happens in Denver, and they have to evacuate patients out of Denver, they could potentially send them here. They would go to the closest one. They would fly them in on a DoD aircraft. We would receive those patients. We would tag them, find them a bed at a hospital somewhere, and then send them out in a Gold Cross ambulance to whatever hospital that they would go to. And so I've only seen that from that perspective as a state guy. I've only seen us receive these fake aircraft and exercises and theoretically move them. But it was cool to see the other end, the other side of like what it would look like at the airhead to move them out, right? So, we had DMAT teams there. We had two of them. We had one critical TCCT, the trauma critical care team. They actually have like an operating room that they deploy with, and they can do surgery, and they've got surgeons and doctors and all sorts of cool stuff. And so they can take care of the more critical patients. They have ventilators, those types of things to take care of those patients, while we take care of the lower acuity patients. And then the Department of Defense had the Air Force there. They deployed a unit. Their job was going to be to take the patients from our tent to put them on the aircraft. There's like 30 of them. That was their only job. Out of our tent, onto the airplane. And then obviously the C-5 was equipped to take patients out wherever they were going to go if they got evacuated. So fortunately for us, as we did this in Houston, we were at Houston Hobby Airport. We ended up not evacuating anybody, but we were ready if that happened. And then the veterinary response teams and then the victim information center teams are also both federal assets that we can call on to help. The victim information center teams, those guys are great. So if the Department of Defense, federal government, moves somebody out of Utah or moves somebody into Utah, one of these team members is assigned to them, knows where they go through our patient tracking system, knows their care, can return them. So if they get discharged from the hospital and they can go home, they can return them. They could also help them get back once recovery occurs. So they could arrange a medical flight for them to return back to wherever they were evacuated from if that was the case. So their job is to see them from the time that the state says, we need you to help us move these patients until they return home. So a pretty cool group. I didn't do any of that. Let's see. Okay, so this is just one of the DMAT missions that we were on here. We ended up not seeing any patients, like I told you, so we just ran those 30 Air Force guys through as patients 5 or 6 times to test our process. Worked pretty well. So this is the ambulance compact, which we're going to talk about here in a minute, maybe. Oh, no, I missed my slide. Sorry, stand by for that. So the federal government has said to us, hey, Utah, we don't want you to tell us what you need. We want you to tell us what you need to do. So they've said, don't tell us that you need a DMAT team for ER decompression. Tell us that there's a hospital that ER is overrun and needs assistance or something like that. Or we need to do X. We need to take care of these patients. We have this nursing home is evacuating and we need assistance with these patients. So that the federal government then can turn around and say, okay, let us provide that resource. Let us decide what's best. It might be that we need to deploy in a TCCT because that is the only hospital in this area, and those patients may need a higher level of care, so we're going to deploy them. But if Utah just says, hey, we just want a DMAT team, they might not get the right resources. So they've asked us for mission support. So we say we need hospital augmentation, we need a mass fatality response, we need help with patient movement. Patient movement, FEMA, this is the strange part, FEMA holds a contract with AMR Ambulance. AMR Ambulance is the contract holder for the ambulance compact. And we can access, as states, we can access the ambulance compact before a Stafford Act if we need to. So we can call on that ambulance compact as well. They will send strike teams of BLS and ALS ambulances at our discretion to assist us with patient movement. So if we have to move patients, if hospital A is closing and they need to go to B, they can help us facilitate that. The idea, too, of the ambulance compact is that we would lessen the burden on the 911 system that already still needs to be running. So we can't necessarily pull 10 or 12 ambulances off of 911 to go move patients from hospital to hospital because they still have a critical mission on 911. And so, yes. All around us. So Las Vegas is the closest, Phoenix, But here's the trick to the AMR contract, is that AMR owns the contract. They subcontract with every other private ambulance service in the country. So theoretically, that's a general statement that I probably shouldn't say. There's a lot of other ambulance services that are in that compact. So AMR says by their region, they can have 300 ambulances or whatever the compact says available in X amount of time. And so that might not be like this guy right here, like these ambulances right here, there is not one AMR ambulance in that row. They're like, I think this one says Medic 1, this one says Wanahaka County from wherever that is, and these other 3 are from somewhere else too. So none of these ambulances were the same for us. We had 5 ambulances staged with us at all times. They were all different, but they're on the AMR contract. We got weapons mass detection response. So going back to this. So we decided to test this, and it was really cool to watch, okay? So we decided that we were gonna say ambulance comes in from wherever, nursing home, hospital for evacuation. We're going to put them in our tent, track them, get them in the system, build a flight manifest. The DOD built that flight manifest. The National Guard guys came in with their little litter bearer things, put them on that, and moved them out to the aircraft. The aircraft never took off, but we got to that process, and it was pretty neat to see. It was really cool for me to see that because one of our challenges from the state level is that outbound patient movement, and it's never easy. So they tell us we can fit 36 patients on a C5. So you want to evacuate 36 patients? Cool, but here's the problem, Brett. Number one is if they have anything that travels with them, reduce it by 1. So if they have an oxygen concentrator, if they have a ventilator, whatever it is, your 36 is now 34. If they are over 365 pounds, reduce it by 2 plus 1. If they are a critical care patient, reduce it by 6. So if you put 2 critical care patients on there, that's 12 of those 36 beds that are gone because they need the staff to be able to manage those patients. So they really, really only want yellows and greens. That's all they want on those. And by the triage, that's a whole nother topic of conversation, but triaging patients that are already being taken care of is weird to me. Like, they're not green if they're green in the sense that like they're probably okay, but they're not green if we're putting them on an airplane to move them to another hospital to receive patient care, right? Like, anyway, so those, they could take 36 green patients or start reducing them based off of that. So now we collect all of these patients, they all come in and they say, okay, now you need to manifest them out. So we have a tough road to hoe here because from the state perspective, now we've got to figure out, do I put 2 critical patients on that, reduce that C5 by 12, or do we contract with AirMed, Life Flight, Eagle Air Flying Lifesaver 101 from Elko to come in and take those 2 critical patients, put them on, to take the 2 critical patients and then have 12 more spaces on that C5. That's the challenge we're faced against, right? So it's going to be, when that disaster occurs, one of the things that I learned is that it's not cut and dry. It's not, here's 36 patients, put them on there, let them go to wherever they're going. It's a lot more labor intensive than that, and recognizing what resources might be best for them. And burn beds are one of those things that we want to talk about today, but that's a whole nother animal of like, if they're burned, there's only so many burn facilities they can go to, and how do they get there? Yes? Yes, I think the term that they use is non-acute care for but they still need some type of care, but they should be non-acute for the 36. Yeah, and they might be, in some of the scenarios that we've done for the FCC receiving, they just might be like they haven't seen any healthcare providers yet at all, but they showed up to a federal tent, and so they sent them out, and so. That's Dr. Mark Shaw, by the way, from Utah. All right, so I got 2 scenarios because I want to keep you guys awake. So we're going to run through 2 scenarios. I need your help for this. First scenario, we just did this like a couple weeks ago, right? Who did this? Emory County? Anybody from Emory County in here? Bus crash, right? This is one of those things that I think that we struggle with in rural Utah is that we've got a lot of beautiful national parks and we got a lot of tourists and we seem to crash our fair share of buses. So we had a bus crash in Mexican Hat that we deployed some of our state resources to many years ago, right? Like 2007. I don't know if you guys remember that or not, but we deployed a bunch of our resources down there. So we're going to go walk through this bus crash scenario. So bus crash occurs. Fortunately for us, this last one, Emory County, they handled it like champions. So we're going to talk through some of the things I talked about, and I want your feedback here. So what do we do first then, right? So we got our ambulances. Now one ambulance is going. They're calling for assistance if they have other ambulances. They need to transport more people. And then are there any state resources that could be used in this process right now? Yeah, what are they? Yeah, the IMTs to help control traffic, yeah. Any medical assets, you know, the state? Sure, there are local mass casualty trailers, but if there wasn't, the local government didn't have one, or ours was closer or something like that, you could use the state's mass casualty trailer if you were bandaging or providing some support. The other thing that our mass casualty trailers were also kind of designed for is to help some of the equipment that's on those trailers is on there not necessarily because they're mass casualty items, but because they would need to restock an ambulance. If an ambulance garage in rural, we'll just pick on Garfield, for example. Garfield may not have a ton of XYZ on their ambulances. They have the state minimum, and they've got some more in a storage shed, but they might run out. And so some of that equipment that's on those trailers could help augment those ambulances that are using some of that supplies that may not be able to get any readily right away. And I picked on Garfield, but I'm sure they've got plenty of equipment. I'm not saying they don't have a... Okay, so yeah, but this is probably going to be handled a pretty local event with some state resources. Probably not going to need me to help do anything, right? From a medical logistics perspective. So we could activate some of these things if we wanted to, but all of these things you would have access to pretty readily, right? If it was a really small town with a really small hospital that was going to absorb some of these patients, we could help deploy in a team to assist that, but maybe not. Okay? So our next scenario, anyone know where this is? This is the Northridge earthquake in '94, right? So I'm going to pretend like it's Utah. So this is the Soup Bowl, I-80 Soup Bowl over here in Salt Lake. Okay, so big earthquake happens. What are some of the resources we might need? State resources first. DOT, obviously, because it's freeway. Medical, though. We're going medical here. Our mass casualty trailers, for sure. We're probably going to put up some of our tents somewhere and start treating patients. We're going to have a lot of stuff we're going to be doing, right? So, and then we're probably going to need some federal resources for this. We'll probably request a federal medical station, the 250 beds to help care for patients that are being evacuated from long-term care facilities. The George R. Brown is a good example of that in Houston. We brought in a bunch of, it was just a big, huge convention center, which is really nice. So we had the FMS in there, along with the general population shelter, along with our urgent care, along with a bunch of resources to be able to help people recover. So it was pretty cool, but it's a giant building that had all of those things in it. So we're probably gonna do something similar to that, trying to make sure that we have all of the resources that are available to us from both a state and federal perspective. So we would try to get our state resources out for the first 72 hours-ish. We try to get a UHERT team that was activated and going. The challenge that we run into with our UHERT team, and why I can't say yes, we'd have a UHERT team, is that the federal government uses USERRA to protect their federal medical personnel. You guys know what USERRA is? USERRA is the Uniform Service Act. So the Uniform Service Act says, as an employer, you have no ability to stop a USERRA protected person from going and serving. So as a DMAT member, I am technically fall under the Uniform Code of Military, whatever their rules are, USERRA, that's what it is. And so the Department of Health can't stop me. They can't say, no, you can't go. They can't say anything. They just have to say, yeah, thanks for going, Brett. When you get back, your job will be here. If you'd have got a raise while you're gone, we'll still give that to you too. But that's not real in state government, is it? And so, as a result of that, that's easy. We get federal people to come from across the country because they just tell their employers, see ya, I'll be back in a couple of weeks. State, though, we don't have the same protections, and nor do we want them per se, right? We don't want our UHERT members to be able to walk into their employer and say, I'm out, because it would be a drain on our local system that's already being drained as a result of the disaster, right? So we don't want to stop a nurse who has a critical role in going to their healthcare facility in the disaster-affected area from doing that, okay? But if they were available, if it was a regional event that didn't affect them, or something of that nature, we would ask them to come and help us. So there is always this conversation of like, well, do we provide some protection for our team members? We maybe could, but the real answer is that we want that to be a mutual understanding with their employer, with us, and like Primary Children's, for example, where a lot of our staff come from. They're like, yeah, you can have our staff if they're not needed here, right? If the kids are coming here and we're overrun, I need them here. But if it's, if you have a bus full of kids roll somewhere in southern Utah and you need some additional pediatric care for that to happen, then send them, and we'll make do here. But that needs to be a mutual relationship. So it's not as cut and dry with our state resources. We have 75 people on that team. Fortunately, some of our team members don't necessarily have critical roles in a healthcare facility, so they might be able to shake loose, and we could help make that happen. Okay, so all the things. DMORT teams could come, DMAT teams could come, TCCTs, the trauma care teams could come. Everybody could come and join our party for the medical response for this. I think that's all I have. Any questions anybody has about our medical assets? I hope this was helpful. Clear as mud, Bob? Clear as mud? Clear as mud? Yeah. Yeah.
I heard that you were going to put GPS trackers on the mascot trailers so we knew where they were when they got moved around, because sometimes they get redeployed to an event and then they're not used and they're not able to put back or whatever. So have you done that? Do you know where they are?
Wow. No. There's this little thing that really struggle with, and it's Michelle not giving me any money. So, and Kevin, I guess, but no. So we ran into some roadblocks with the GPS units for the trailers. Number one is they need constant power. So if the trailer's not plugged in, the GPS units that we've looked at, that we've thought about, have batteries, so you'd have to go switch the batteries out, or they'd have to be plugged in and then unplugged and ran off batteries. So the GPS unit, while it's a great idea, is not something for sitting static. We have been working with Scott in our office on some GISing so that we have a spreadsheet of where all the trailers are supposed to be, and then and that spreadsheet can then feed into a Google map that can tell us where they all are, but that still requires us to know when those trailers are moving, and we've done a better job, I think, recently of getting requests for those trailer moves and then notifying everybody that it's happening. So if I think we're moving a trailer from Salt Lake to Sundance, to Park City for Sundance this week. And so everybody that is affected by that has been notified. So send out an email that said, hey, this trailer is moving from this location and it's going to be parked in Park City for the week or 2 weeks or however long Sundance is. And we will return it back to Salt Lake to its proper place when the event is over. If you have any questions, email me, right? So I don't, like, it would be really cool. Power was our number one issue, and then money was number two. Or not. Yeah.
So back to your slide about mission support, that's a federal mission, and then talk about 5 different ways to connect into them. That's kind of you don't tell us what you send, you tell us what you need.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I see. So that's kind of the receptacle in this little electric disconnection, and you got to be able to make that transition. Is the state looking at a similar type of a pattern to connect at the local level where we would do almost the same thing, so it's kind of uniform? That if we've got a problem, we don't sit and say, bring me X, Y, Z, because I need X mission support. Is that anything that you guys have think about?
Yes, and yes, in the sense that like it's like theoretically we're hoping that it's like that way, right? Like it would be nice if you said, because like one example that I gave was, somebody says I need a Blue Med to do this, right? And then I said, well, we have these other structures that work better, faster, stronger. Can we do that? I said, oh yeah, I didn't even know those existed, right? So, but if you said, I have this. Now, WebEOC is designed that way, right? WebEOC says mission. Doesn't say like resource request. It says mission, and the mission is to provide overflow patient care to Bear River Hospital, okay? Then our job then would be, how are we going to provide that? Because it might be state resources that we could deploy to do that. It might be ambulance compacts, just evacuate them somewhere else. It might be bringing in a DMAT team to augment that hospital. So I think that, yes, like hopefully, I can't speak for DEM, but on the whole, I think that that's how they would appreciate it as well, is to say, like, we need this done, and then we can help you from an ESF perspective figure out what that looks like.
So, yeah, I think you can stand by that, you guys may have emergency managers, and then the other component of this, sort of see where it connects, and that's our healthcare coalitions, and the relationships we have with them, and the resources we can utilize with them for movement of patients.
Yeah, so we still consider the Healthcare Coalition resources local. So they all live in a local health department, and they all have local health department oversight. And so those are local resources that we're not in the business. So if, for example, if from the Salt Lake Summit Tooele Coalition, they had a communications trailer that you wanted in northern, the northern area, you would request that from them, and they would send it to you. It's not coming through me or us at the state health department, because it's not ours. It's the local health departments that run those coalitions. So, yeah, yes. Yep. And then when you were tapped out, you would say, we need this. Yep. We kind of did that with a PPE buy for Ebola, right? Everybody bought PPE and stuff for their coalitions. And if that ran out, then you could call us for the state, and we would try to backfill that or request it from the federal government to get you additional. Any other questions? Okay, thank you guys. Appreciate your time.